remembering those that survived the sinking of the RMS Titanic on April 15, 1912. The information provided was obtained and used from findagrave.com. This video contains passengers and employees with the last name starting with B. The remaining survivors will follow shortly. Maria Matilde Gustafsson Backstrom, born 1878, in Finland. She boarded the Titanic with her husband and 2 of her brothers. They were all third-class passengers. Maria was 33 years of age at the time and was 6 months pregnant. She was in collapsible lifeboat D and was rescued by the Carpathia. Her brothers and husband perished in the sinking. Maria passed away in 1947 at the age of 68. She was buried in Finland. There is no information available on the unborn child. The next survivor is the Al-Baklini family. Mother, Latifa Marigiam Kurban Baklini, born 1888 in Syria. Daughter, Marie Catherine Baklini Kaniser, born 1906 in Syria. Daughter, Eugenie Baklini, born 1909 in Syria. Daughter, Helene Barbara Baklini Mueller, born 1911 in Syria. Son, David Slayman Baklini, born 1913 in New York. Latifa boarded the Titanic with her 3 daughters and unborn son. They were third-class passengers and was accompanying her neighbor's daughter on the Titanic. The family was traveling to New York where Latifa's husband established a dry goods business. They were rescued by Lifeboat C. Tragedy struck the family after arriving in New York. Eugenie contracted meningitis and passed away in August 1912 at the age of 3. Latifa gave birth to her son in 1913. He was the first child conceived by a survivor following the disaster. In 1914, Latifa gave birth to another daughter. Latifa lived in New York the rest of her life and passed away in 1962 at the age of 73. Helene was 1 year of age when she boarded the Titanic. She was married and passed away in 1939 as a result of breast cancer at the age of 27. Marie was 6 years of age when she boarded the Titanic. She passed away in 1982 at the age of 75. David, the unborn son, passed away in 1986 at the age of 73. The family were all buried in New York. The next survivor is Emily Louisa Badman O'Grady, born 1894, in England. She was a third-class passenger and was rescued on collapsible lifeboat C by the Carpathia. The following week, she served as a bridesmaid for a fellow Titanic survivor, Sarah Roth. In 1913, she was married and had 4 children. Emily passed away in 1946 at the age of 52. She was buried in New Jersey. The next survivor is Alan Martin Baggett, born 1884, in England. He was a steward, first class. The night of the sinking, Alan was accommodated in Lifeboat 9. Following the sinking of the Titanic, and while working on other ships, Alan started drinking alcohol. His alcoholism became apparent and he appears on the ship's log on numerous occasions, for drunkenness and disorderly conduct. He later joined the Royal Fleet Auxiliary and was serving on our F.A. Perthshire as a ship's chief steward in Malta. In 1921, Alan took ill and was on his way to Biggie Hospital, where he suffered a seizure and passed away. He was 36 years of age and was buried in Malta. The next survivor is Henry Joseph Bailey, born 1865, in England. His mother passed away in 1911. Henry was the Titanic's master at arms. During the sinking, Henry climbed down the ropes on the side of the Titanic into Lifeboat 16, where he took command of that lifeboat. Henry passed away in 1943 at the age of 77. He was cremated and his ashes were scattered in the Garden of Rest, in England. The next survivor is Percy Ball, born 1893, in England. He was a plateman steward on the Titanic. Percy was rescued in Lifeboat 13 by the Carpathia. He passed away in 1933 at the age of 40 due to tuberculosis. Percy was buried in England in an unmarked grave. The next survivor is Ada Elizabeth Hall Perrine, born 1875 in England. She was married to Mr. Ball in 1896, and they had 2 sons. After the death of her husband, she left her sons in England and emigrated to Florida. Ada boarded the Titanic with her brother-in-law and were traveling to Florida, where her sister and brother-in-law resided. They planned on doing missionary work while there. She recalled several years later, jumping into the water, with no life jacket, and couldn't swim, had faith in the Lord. A nearby lifeboat 10 picked her up and was rescued by the Carpathia. Over 1 year later, she was reunited with her sons. In 1925, Ada married Mr. Perrine and lived a very happy life. Ada was a devout Christian and was known for her kindness and generosity to all she met. She relocated to Massachusetts and passed away in 1967 at the age of 92 due to leukemia. She was buried in Maryland. The next survivor is Ellen Mary Barber, born 1885 in England. She was 26 years of age and single. Ellen boarded the Titanic and was a first-class passenger. She was the personal maid to Julia Cavendish. Ellen was rescued in Lifeboat 6. She passed away in 1963 at the age of 77, 4 months after Julia Cavendish. Ellen was cremated and her ashes were scattered in the main garden at the Streatham Park Cemetery in England. Her estate was valued at £436 or $1,220 and was administered to her aunt. The next survivor is Algernon Henry Barkworth, born 1864, in England. He was a Justice of the Peace in Yorkshire, UK, and he came from a wealthy family. Algernon boarded the Titanic as a first-class passenger and was traveling to the USA. He was planning on spending a whole month there. While on the Titanic, Algernon spent much of his time with 2 other gentlemen, engrossed in a debate about good road building. As the ship sank, he pulled a heavy fur coat over his lifebelt, threw his briefcase into the water, and stepped in after it. Algernon made his way to Collapsible B, which had overturned, and was able to drag himself aboard. He returned back to England and lived in the Tranby house the rest of his life. Algernon never married, and it was suggested that he was one of the LGBT passengers. He passed away in 1945 at the age of 80 due to toxemia and chronic respiratory problems. Algernon was buried in England. The next survivor is Frederick William Barrett, born 1883, in England. He was a leading fireman on the Titanic, and his monthly income was £6 or $29.20. Shortly after departure from Southampton, a fire broke out in Boiler Room 6. Upon inspection, the bulkhead was severely damaged. When the bell sounded, a red light flashed on. The firemen shut the dampers, then a crash happened and icy water began coming in. Frederick and another gentleman retreated to Boiler Room 5 just as the watertight door closed. Frederick made his way up to Deck A and was able to get into Lifeboat 13. He was called to testify at both the British and American inquiries into the sinking. Frederick was married, and it is unknown how many children they had. In 1923, Frederick's wife passed away at age 39, and he never remarried. Later, he worked on shore as a timber laborer. Frederick was afflicted with pulmonary tuberculosis, and he passed away in 1931 at the age of 48. His burial details are unknown. The next survivor is Alvina Bazzani Papetti, born 1880, in Italy. She was 32 years of age when she boarded the Titanic. Alvina was a first-class passenger and the maid for Emma Bucknell. They both were returning to Pennsylvania. As the Titanic was sinking, Alvina and Emma boarded Lifeboat 8 and was picked up by the Carpathia. Her maiden name was Bazzani, however she was married 2 times. After the disaster, it is not likely that she continued to work for Emma. Following the disaster, Alvina filed a sizable claim for loss of property in the amount of $2,890. She also claimed compensation they owed her. Alvina passed away in 1960 at the age of 80. She was buried in Massachusetts. The next survivor is Helene de Lanaudière Chaput Baxter, born 1862, in Canada. In 1882, she married James Baxter, also known as Diamond Jim. He was a diamond broker and banker. They had 3 children. In 1900, the family's reputation fell apart when Jim was arrested, charged, and convicted of embezzling $40,000 from his bank. Jim was jailed for 5 years, and shortly after his release, he passed away in 1905. In 1911, Helene sold the mansion and the Baxter block. Helene took her son and married daughter on an excursion to Europe. The family boarded the Titanic, and Helene was ill with nausea most of the voyage. During the sinking, Helene and her daughter was placed into lifeboat 6 by her son. They were rescued by the Carpathia, but her son perished in the sinking. Helene never recovered from the effects. She passed away in 1923, at the age of 61, in her apartment. Helene was buried in Canada. The next survivor is the Bean family. Husband, Edward Bean, born 1879, in England. Wife, Ethel Louisa Clark Bean, born 1892, in England. Edward resided in New York, and returned to England to marry Ethel. They were married in March, 1912. The newlyweds boarded the Titanic as second-class passengers and was returning back to New York. On the night of the sinking, Edward jumped into the water and was pulled into a lifeboat. He was rescued by the Carpathia. Edward did not know that Ethel had survived until he reached New York. He set a policy with Ethel to never speak publicly about the experience. Ethel stated that she had seen the Titanic crew hold men back at gunpoint, preventing them from boarding into lifeboats. She actually saw one man get shot. Edward passed away in 1948 at the age of 68. Ethel passed away in 1983 at the age of 90. They both died from heart failure and were buried in New York. The next survivor is George William Beecham, born 1888, in England. He was a fireman on the Titanic. George was in the boiler rooms when the Titanic struck the iceberg. He survived the sinking in Lifeboat 13. George testified at the British inquiry in the Titanic disaster. He never married after the sinking. George continued to work at sea and later at Southampton's docks. He spent the last years of his life living in the Woolpack Inn. George was reportedly a popular figure with the regulars. He passed away in 1965 at the age of 77. George was cremated and his ashes were scattered in Section 3. His grave is unmarked. The next survivor is the Becker family. Mother, Nellie Estella Baumgardner Becker. Daughter, Ruth Elizabeth Becker Blanchard. Daughter, Marion Louise Becker. Son, Richard Fulton Becker. Nellie Estella Baumgardner Becker, born 1876, in Ohio. She was the widow of Reverend Becker. Nellie was 35 years of age when she boarded the Titanic along with her 3 children. They were all second-class passengers and were traveling to Michigan to seek medical treatment for Richard. He had contracted a disease while the family was living in India. Nellie passed away in 1961 at the age of 84 due to heart failure. She was buried in Illinois. Ruth Elizabeth Becker Blanchard, born 1899, in India. She was 12 years of age when she boarded the Titanic as a second-class passenger. Ruth was initially separated from her mother and siblings after being placed in different lifeboats. She was rescued by Lifeboat 13. Ruth was reunited with them once she got on the Carpathia. Following the disaster, Ruth attended high school and college, before marrying and beginning a high school teaching career in Missouri. Ruth's marriage ended in a divorce. In the early years, she refused to talk about the disaster, keeping it from her children that she had been a passenger. Later in her years, she was the Titanic's most recognizable vocal public figures. Ruth gave interviews, appeared in television documentaries, and attended conventions. She stated that the wreckage site should remain untouched. Ruth passed away in 1990, at the age of 90, due to malnutrition. She was cremated and her ashes were scattered at sea, over the Titanic. Marion Louise Becker, born 1907, in India. Marion never married. She passed away in 1944 at the age of 36, due to tuberculosis. She was buried in Illinois. Richard Fulton Becker, born 1910, in India. He was first married and she passed away in 1942, at the age of 30. Richard became a singer and later in life he was a social welfare worker. Widowed for the second time, he passed away in 1975, at the age of 65, due to kidney disease. Richard was buried in Illinois. The next survivor is the Beckwith family. Husband, Richard Leonard Beckwith, born 1874, in Connecticut. Wife, Sarah Manipony Beckwith, born 1865, in Ohio. Richard graduated from Yale and was a realtor. He married Sarah in 1903 and were parents of 2 children. The couple settled in New York and were frequent travelers. They boarded the Titanic, along with their daughter, and were first-class passengers. On the night of the sinking, they entered Lifeboat 5 and survived. Richard was 5 feet, 10 inches tall, with light brown hair, gray eyes, and a round face. He passed away in 1933, at the age of 58, due to heart failure. Sarah passed away in 1955, at the age of 89, due to natural causes. Richard was buried in Connecticut at the Beckwith family plot. Sarah was cremated, and her ashes were scattered on her husband's grave. The next survivor is Lawrence Beasley, born 1877, in England. He was married in 1901, and his second wife in 1919. Lawrence boarded the Titanic, and was rescued by Lifeboat 13. After the sinking, he wrote a successful book called The Loss of the SS Titanic. It was about his experience. Lawrence was an English science teacher, journalist, and author. He later became headmaster of the Normandy Preparatory School, in England. Lawrence passed away in 1967, at the age of 89. He was buried in England. The next survivor is Carl Howell Sr., born 1885, in New York. He was a well-known lawn tennis player, playing in the United States Davis Cup and the Wimbledon. Carl reached the number 3 U.S. ranking in 1907 and 1914. He later went into banking and was the vice president of Dillon, Reed and Company. Also on board the Fisk Rubber Company, Goodyear Tire and Rubber Company, and the National Cash Register Company. Carl was a first-class passenger and was rescued by Lifeboat 5. He passed away in 1949 at the age of 64 due to natural causes. Carl was cremated and laid to rest in New Jersey. The next survivor is Mabel Kate Pilgrim Bennett, born 1878, in England. She was a stewardess on the Titanic and was rescued in Lifeboat 5. Mabel was married, and her brother-in-law and nephew were on board the Titanic as well. Her brother-in-law survived, but her nephew did not. Mabel remarried in 1918. She died in 1974, at the age of 96. Mabel was cremated, and her ashes were scattered at the Garden of Remembrance, in England. The next survivor is Lillian Winifred Bentham Black, born 1892, in New York. Her father passed away 6 months earlier. Lillian was 19 years of age when she boarded the Titanic and was a second-class passenger. She was loaded into Lifeboat 12 and was rescued by the Carpathia. Lillian spent her adult life in New York. She married Mr. Black, and they had no children. Lillian lived with her brother near the end of her life. She passed away in 1977 at the age of 85. Lillian is buried in New York, in the grave of her predeceased sister, Daisy, as she requested. Her sister passed away in 1904 at the age of 16. Their graves were unmarked until 2015. The Brigden Memorials in Albion donated an elaborate marker. The next survivor is Nellie Mayo Bassett, born 1872, in Vermont. She boarded the Titanic as a maid to Mrs. White. They both were rescued on Lifeboat 8. Nellie passed away in 1944 at the age of 71 due to cancer. She was buried in Vermont. The next survivor is Rosalie Bidois, born 1865, in Bailiwick of Jersey. She was a Titanic survivor, being rescued on Lifeboat 4. Rosalie was married to Mr. Cortondale, but they divorced. She passed away in 1938 at the age of 73. Rosalie was buried in New York under her divorce name, but is not mentioned on the grave of her sister. The next survivor is Li Bing, born 1880, in Hong Kong. He was a third-class passenger and was rescued on collapsible Lifeboat C by the Carpathia. Li's death and burial is unknown. The next survivor is Walter William Binstead, born 1891, in England. He was a trimmer on the Titanic. Walter survived the sinking by being placed in Lifeboat 3. In 1941, Walter was married. He passed away in the spring of 1959 at the age of 68. Walter was cremated, and his ashes were scattered in Section 6 at the South Stoneham Garden of Remembrance, located in England. The next survivor is Ellen Bird Beatty, born 1881, in England. She was the maid to Mrs. Strauss, who perished in the sinking. Ellen boarded Lifeboat 8 and was saved. She married and lived the rest of her life in Rhode Island. Ellen passed away in 1949 at the age of 68. She was buried in Massachusetts. The next survivor is the Bishop family. Husband, Dickinson Horace Bishop Sr., born 1887, in Michigan. Wife, Helen Margaret Walton Bishop, born 1892, in Michigan. Son, Randy Walton Bishop, born 1912, in Michigan. Dickinson was a United States veteran of World War I. He became a wealthy widower when his first wife's will left him a major share in the Round Oak Stove Company in Michigan. Pictured here is the mansion that was built for the married couple by her parents. It was later donated for use as a hospital around 1914. In 1911, he married Helen, and they had spent a 4-month honeymoon touring Egypt, Italy, France, and Algiers. Dickinson was 25 years of age when he boarded the Titanic along with his pregnant wife. They both survived the sinking in Lifeboat 7 and also survived an earthquake in California. In 1916, they divorced due to the result of mental instability. Dickinson married his third wife, Sydney, in 1916. They had 2 sons. She was the daughter of publisher and founder of the Boy Scouts of America. Helen was pregnant while on board the Titanic. In December 1912, she gave birth to baby boy Randall Walton Bishop. Randall passed away 2 days later. He was buried in Dowagiac, Michigan. After the disaster, local jealousy spawned a rumor that Dickinson survived the sinking by escaping in women's clothing. While this was a complete fabrication, the marriage suffered as a result of the public ridicule. Around the same time, they were involved in a car accident in which Helen was critically injured. Their motor car went out of control and struck a tree. Helen suffered a severely skull fracture and was not expected to live. She recovered with a steel plate in her skull. The accident changed her mental condition, which resulted in the divorce. In March 1916, Helen slipped on a rug in her home and hit her head on the vulnerable spot where she had been struck in the motor car accident. Helen passed away as a result of the injuries she sustained. She was 23 years of age. On the same day of her death, her ex-husband was remarried. Helen's death announcement was featured in the local newspaper, where the front page also included the announcement of Dickinson's marriage. Helen was buried in Sturgis, Michigan. In June 2021, a letter was sent to the cemetery in Sturgis by a representative of Helen's mother. She requested to have Randall moved from Dowagiac to Sturgis and quietly reburied with his mother. Randall has a listing on the bottom of her small headstone. Dickinson passed away in 1961 at the age of 73 due to a stroke. He was buried in Illinois. The next survivor is Moritz Håkan Bjornström Stephenson, born 1883, in Sweden. He was rescued on lifeboat D. Moritz placed the largest monetary claim against the White Star Line for a painting by Mary Joseph Blondel. Later in life, he developed property on Park Avenue and owned one of the last remaining private houses in Manhattan on 57th Street. Moritz passed away in 1962 at the age of 78 due to a stroke. He was buried in Connecticut. The next survivor is Percival Albert Blake, born 1889, in England. He was a trimmer on board the Titanic. Percival was rescued on lifeboat 15. He never married after the Titanic disaster. Percival passed away in 1968 at the age of 78. He was cremated and his ashes scattered in the Garden of Remembrance, located in England. The next survivor is Henry Blank, born 1872, in Rhode Island. He was married and had 3 children. Henry was a prominent jewelry manufacturer in New Jersey. He was 39 years of age when he boarded the Titanic. Henry was rescued in Lifeboat 7. He built this home in 1907 in Glen Ridge, New Jersey, living in one of the finest estates in that village. His Georgian-style mansion still stands today on Ridgewood Avenue. Henry lived there throughout the rest of his life. In 1949, he passed away in his home at the age of 76 due to pneumonia. Henry was buried in Arlington Cemetery in Pennsylvania. The next survivor is Emma Junid Bliss, born 1866, in Switzerland. She was married and had 2 children. Emma was a stewardess on the Titanic and her monthly income was £3 or $14.60. She was rescued on Lifeboat 15. Emma attended the 1939 reunion of survivors in Canada. Pictured here is Emma watching A Night to Remember. Emma passed away in 1959 at the age of 93. She was buried in Canada. The next survivor is the Bonnell family. Aunt Elizabeth Bonnell, born 1850, in England. Niece, Caroline Bonnell Jones, born 1882, in Illinois. Elizabeth boarded the Titanic along with the Wick family and her niece Caroline. They were first-class passengers and was rescued on Lifeboat 8. Caroline later married Mr. Jones, and they had 2 children. Elizabeth passed away in 1936 at the age of 85. She was buried in England. Caroline passed away in 1950 at the age of 67 from epithelioma. She was buried in Ohio. The next survivor is Grace Scott Bowen, born 1867, in New York. She was educated in Cooperstown High School, where she graduated in 1883. Grace devoted her life to teaching and private tutoring. She was the principal of the St. Christina School of the Susan Fenimore Cooper Foundation. For 15 years, she headed the Latin department of the Knox School for Girls. To express their appreciation, her students gave her an automobile. Grace's hobby was her flower garden, and a versatile writer. She boarded the Titanic with the Ryerson family, to act as a tutor and governess to their children. They were first-class passengers. Grace and the Ryerson family survived the sinking, escaping in Lifeboat 4. She never married, and continued to live in the family home. Grace passed away in the hospital in 1945, at the age of 78, due to a stroke. Her funeral was held in her home, where she was born and had always lived. Grace was buried in New York, at the Bowen family plot. The next survivor is Elsie Bowerman, born 1889, in England. She joined the Women's Social and Political Union in 1909. The following year, she established a branch in the college. Elsie and her mother boarded the Titanic, and were first-class passengers. They both survived the sinking in Lifeboat 6. Called to the bar in 1924, Elsie was one of the first female barristers. She practiced until 1938. During the Second World War, Elsie worked for the Ministry of Information and was a liaison officer for the BBC through 1945. Elsie passed away in 1973, at the age of 83, due to a stroke. She is buried with her mother, in the Bowerman family plot, in England. The next survivor is Ruth Hardwood Boker, born 1880, in England. Her father passed away 9 days earlier, when she boarded the Titanic. Ruth was a cashier in the a la carte restaurant. She survived the sinking in Lifeboat 6. Ruth passed away in 1956, at the age of 75, due to heart failure. She was buried in England, in an unmarked grave. The next survivor is Commander Joseph Groves Boxhall Jr., born 1884, in England. He was a lieutenant during his torpedo boat service. In 1907, he joined the White Star Line, as a junior officer. When the Titanic struck the iceberg, he was ordered to go down and inspect the forward part of the Titanic. Joseph did not see any damage, but a passenger handed him a chunk of ice that had broken off and fallen onto the deck. He was then put into charge of Lifeboat 2. Joseph rowed the half-full lifeboat away from the Titanic. The rescue ship Carpathia saw the flares that Joseph had sent up, which guided them to the lifeboats. Joseph was called as a star witness to testify about the Titanic's final hours. In 1915, Joseph was commissioned to serve during World War I, on board the HMS Commonwealth. Joseph returned to sea with several other ship lines, working his way up to chief officer, retiring in 1940. In 1958, he served as the technical advisor for the film, A Night to Remember. This picture was taken at the Odeon Leicester Square, London, during the premiere. He is pictured in the middle. Joseph passed away in 1967 due to cerebral thrombosis. He was cremated, and his ashes were scattered at sea, at the last known site of the Titanic. Joseph has been written about extensively, and has been portrayed in numerous films throughout the world. The next survivor is Bridget Delia Bradley Lasha, born 1890, in Ireland. She boarded the Titanic as a third-class passenger. Bridget survived the sinking in Lifeboat 13. In 1926, she married Mr. Lasha. She saw the movie Titanic in 1953. Bridget passed away in 1956, at the age of 66. She was buried in Canada. The next survivor is George Andrew Brereton, born 1874, in Minnesota. He boarded the Titanic as a first-class passenger, and was 37 years of age. George was one of the 3 infamous gamblers aboard the Titanic. He made a career out of scamming people. George survived the sinking by being rescued in Lifeboat 9. He passed away in 1942, at the age of 67, due to an intentional gunshot wound to the head. George was buried in California. The next survivor is Walter Thomas Bryce, born 1869, in England. He was married in 1907, and the couple would have no children. Walter was an able seaman on the Titanic, and his monthly income was £5 or $24.30. On the night of the disaster, Walter had been on watch since 8 p.m. and was outside the seaman's mess on deck C. Walter heard the impact, felt the ship vibrate, and said it lasted about 10 seconds. He saw ice that had fallen from the iceberg. Walter lowered lifeboat 9 before he boarded lifeboat 11. He watched the Titanic sink from about a quarter of a mile away and was rescued by the Carpathia. Walter was a witness at the U.S. Senate inquiry. He returned to working at sea and for the duration of World War I. In 1919, Walter remarried. Walter was described as being 5 foot 6 inches tall, with light hair, gray eyes, and a fresh complexion, and exemplary conduct. He passed away in 1928, at the age of 58. Walter was buried in England, in an unmarked grave. The next survivor is Harold Sidney Bride, born 1890, in England. He was one of the operators of the Marconi wireless radio system on the Titanic. Harold and John Phillips worked frantically through the late-night hours, relaying messages between Captain Smith and the Carpathia. He escaped the sinking ship by grabbing an oar's lock of the last remaining lifeboat. As it was carried over the side, it was overturned by a large wave, resulting from the exploding boiler. Harold was trapped briefly beneath the lifeboat, but he managed to climb aboard it. He was rescued by the Carpathia. Harold suffered severe exposure and crushed feet. Following a stay in the hospital, he returned to England, where he resumed his career as a wireless operator. Harold was deeply disturbed by the sinking, and he rarely spoke of the incident and sought to avoid celebrity status and attention as a Titanic survivor. Seeking privacy, he eventually moved his family to Scotland, where he worked as a traveling salesman. Harold lived the remainder of his life in virtual seclusion, until he passed away in 1956, at the age of 66, due to cancer. He was cremated and his ashes were scattered at the Glasgow Crematorium, in Scotland. The next survivor is Arthur John Bright, born 1869, in England. He was a quartermaster on board the Titanic. Arthur was not on duty when the accident occurred. He was asleep when awakened by another quartermaster, telling him that the Titanic is going down. Arthur went to the after end of the ship to relieve colleague George Rowe. He then phoned the bridge and was ordered to bring up the detonators. Arthur helped in firing the rockets. Afterwards, Arthur helped uncover and load passengers into the collapsibles. He took command on Collapsible D and was rescued by the Carpathia. Arthur was one of the few who testified that the Titanic broke in two before she sank. He was married 3 times, and all of them predeceased him. Arthur passed away in 1955 at the age of 86. He was buried in England. The next survivor is Amelia Mary Brown, born 1893, in England. She worked as a cook for the Allison family and was traveling second class. Amelia survived the sinking in lifeboat 11. She was married to Mr. Barrow. Amelia passed away in 1976 at the age of 82. She was buried in England. The next survivor is Caroline Lane Sampson Brown, born 1852, in New York. She boarded the Titanic and was 59 years of age. Caroline survived the sinking in lifeboat 4. She passed away in 1928 at the age of 75. Caroline was buried in Massachusetts, in the Brown family plot. The next survivor is the Brown family. Mother, Elizabeth Catherine Ford Brown. Daughter, Edith Eileen Brown Haseman. Elizabeth Catherine Ford Brown, born 1868, in South Africa. She was married to Thomas Brown, and they boarded the Titanic as second-class passengers, along with their daughter. They were traveling to Washington. Elizabeth was 20 years younger than her husband, and was his second wife. She survived the sinking in Lifeboat 13. Elizabeth died in 1925, at the age of 57, due to heart failure. Her burial details are unknown. Edith Eileen Brown Haseman, born 1896, in Africa. She was 15 years of age when she boarded the Titanic with her parents. On the night of the sinking, Edith's father waved from the deck saying, "I will see you in New York." Edith survived the sinking in Lifeboat 13, while her father perished in the sinking. In 1993, she described her ordeal stating, "When the Titanic went into the ice, she heard 3 bangs, and felt terrible vibrations from the engines. As the lifeboat pulled away, she heard cries from people, left on the ship and in the water. There were lots of bodies floating. They kept rescuing people, covering them against the cold. The lifeboat was in the water for 9 hours." Edith married Mr. Haseman, in South Africa. They had 10 children, and more than 30 grandchildren. She passed away in 1997, at the age of 100, due to pneumonia. Edith was buried in England. The next survivor is Edward Brown, born 1878, in Wales. He was a dining room steward, first class. When the Titanic sank, Edward was trying to launch collapsible Lifeboat A, when a wave swept people off of it. Edward cut the ropes that connected it to the Titanic. He was able to get in it and survived the sinking. He married in 1919, but his health started to decline. His family believes that his survival of the Titanic was the main cause. Edward passed away in 1926, at the age of 48. He was buried in England, in an unmarked grave. The next survivor is Margaret Brown, also known as the unsinkable Molly Brown, born 1867, in Missouri. She was a humanitarian, philanthropist, suffragist, preservationist, politician, author, stage actress, singer, and a Titanic survivor. At the age of 19, she went to live with her brother in Colorado. In the summer 1886, she met Mr. J. Brown, and were married in September the same year. Her husband worked in the mines, and Margaret started soup kitchens in the mining community, and became active in women's rights. Her husband found a way to make them wealthy. In 1894, they moved to Denver, and she became an associate member of the Denver's Women's Press Club. Margaret would soon publish many essay travels, an account of her Titanic experience, and an autobiography. In 1903, Margaret and a judge created a juvenile justice system, specializing in how the state treated juvenile crimes. Margaret became very involved in politics, and ran for the United States Senate, in 1909, and again in 1911. In 1909, the Browns quietly signed a separation agreement, and went their own way. They were married 23 years, and never reconciled, but remained connected throughout their lives. She boarded the Titanic and survived the sinking in Lifeboat 6. After the sinking, she took action in helping the survivors, by finding blankets, supplies, and compiling a list of information, to be radioed to their families. She rallied first-class passengers to donate funds, to help the less fortunate. A total of $10,000 was raised. When interviewed by reporters, they asked her what attributed to her survival. She replied, "Typical Brown luck, we're unsinkable." The Titanic disaster made her a national hero. Margaret helped get a memorial erected to the survivors in Washington, D.C. In 1929, Margaret was awarded the prestigious Palm of the Academy of France. In 1932, Margaret was awarded the Legion of Honor. Soon afterwards, Margaret passed away in her sleep, at a hotel, due to a cerebral hemorrhage with contributory arteriosclerosis. She was 65 years of age, and was buried in New York. Decades after her death, the name Molly was given to her, when her life was dramatized by the Broadway stage play and subsequent movie, The Unsinkable Molly Brown. The next survivor is Dagmar Jenny Brill Holmberg, born 1891, in Sweden. She was a Titanic survivor. There is no information available on this individual. I am leaving this lily for you, you are not forgotten. The following information provided was obtained and used from the Encyclopedia Titanica website. The spouse listed on her Find a Grave is actually her half-brother. Dagmar boarded the Titanic along with her half-brother and her fiancé. They were second-class passengers and was traveling to Illinois. On that fateful night, her half-brother and fiancé perished in the sinking. Dagmar didn't remember the number on the boat, but she noticed that it was not even full when it was lowered. She probably was rescued in lifeboat 12. Following the disaster, Dagmar was completely broken down and decided to return to Sweden. The White Star Line paid for her ticket. Later on, Dagmar was reported to have recovered, but now and then seemed to fall into trance, brought on by the unpleasant memory. Dagmar finally made it back to Sweden, where she later married a teacher, Mr. Holmberg. In 1969, Dagmar passed away. She was buried in Sweden. The next survivor is Private Daniel Buckley Jr., born 1890, in Ireland. Daniel felt that he could have a better life and more money in America. In 1912, he and a group of friends held a party before setting out on the transatlantic voyage. Daniel sang the song, "When the Fields Are White with Daisies, I'll Return." They all boarded the Titanic, and on the night of the sinking, trouble arose. When the lifeboat Daniel got into, the men were ordered out of it, supposedly by gunpoint. A kind-hearted woman took pity on the crying young man, and threw a shawl over Daniel, thus disguising him as a woman. Daniel's savior was Mrs. Appleton. All of Daniel's friends perished in the sinking. Daniel settled in New York, where he worked in a hotel. In 1917, Daniel joined the army. He was in the 69th Regiment, which was entirely all Irishmen. After basic training, Daniel arrived in France, with Company K, of the 165th U.S. Infantry. Daniel proudly served his adopted country. He sustained some wounds, but that did not dampen his enthusiasm. In 1918, Daniel was killed by a sniper, while helping to retrieve wounded soldiers, on the Meuse-Argonne front. Daniel was 28 years of age. He was initially buried in France, but his remains were taken to Ireland, in the spring of 1919. On the day Daniel was buried, the fields were indeed white with daisies. A stunning fulfillment of the song he had sung, the last time he had been in Ireland. Daniel is buried behind Nora O'Leary, another Titanic survivor. The next survivor is Emma Eliza Ward Bucknell, born 1853, in India. She was married to Mr. Bucknell Jr. Emma boarded the Titanic under the name Gertrude. She survived the sinking of the Titanic in Lifeboat 8. Emma passed away in 1927, at the age of 73. She was buried in New York. The next survivor is Edward John Bewley, born 1885, in England. He was 26 years of age, single, and an able seaman on the Titanic. Edward was rescued in Lifeboat 10. In 1917, at the age of 32, Edward passed away when the HMS Partridge was torpedoed and sunk by a German destroyer while serving with the Royal Navy. Edward is commemorated on the Portsmouth Naval Memorial to the missing. It is located in England. The next survivor is Charles Frederick Burgess, born 1894, place unknown. There is no information available on this individual. I am leaving this lily for you, you are not forgotten. The following information was obtained and used from the Encyclopedia Titanica website. In 1890, Charles was married, and they had one son. In 1910, Charles joined the White Star Line. He boarded the Titanic and was an extra third baker, and his monthly income was £4 or $19.50. While waiting at his stationed lifeboat 13, he was instructed to call other bakers that were off duty. Charles's lifeboat contained about 70 people, and lifeboat 15 was coming close to landing on top of them. He stated that the orchestra was playing Nearer My God to Thee, and that the Titanic broke in two as she plunged. Charles continued working at sea into the 1940s. In 1960, Charles passed away at the age of 66. He was buried in Zimbabwe. The next survivor is William Burke, born 1872, in Ireland. He signed on to the Titanic as a steward, and his monthly income was £3 or $14.60. On that fateful night, William was assigned to Lifeboat 1, but found that it was already gone. William then assisted Lifeboats 8 and 10. The chief officer ordered William into Lifeboat 10. After arriving in New York, he was called as a witness to the U.S. inquiry. William resumed his career at sea. He married in 1917 and had 3 children. His only son passed away at the age of 5 days. During the 1950s, William spoke of his experience while the Titanic was at its height, following the movie A Night to Remember. In 1961, William passed away at the age of 88. He was buried in England. The next survivor is Elizabeth Margaret Burns, born 1870, in New Jersey. There is no information on this individual. I am leaving this lily for you, you are not forgotten. The information provided was obtained and used from the Encyclopedia Titanica website. In 1906, Elizabeth was employed by the Spedden family to act as a nursemaid to their young son. In 1912, following an undisclosed illness, the Speddens wanted to show her their appreciation. They invited her to accompany them on a 3-month vacation to Europe. They boarded the Titanic as first-class passengers, and the maid accompanied them as well. They survived the sinking, being rescued in Lifeboat 3. Elizabeth's employment with the Speddens did not last long after the sinking. The Speddens' young boy tragically passed away in a road accident in 1915. Elizabeth was a member of the Red Cross, and busied herself during World War I. Her friends stated that she never fully recovered from the Titanic experience. Elizabeth passed away in 1921 at the age of 50 due to dropsy. She was buried in New Jersey, but her name is not mentioned on the headstone. The next survivor is Arthur Victor Edwards Barrage, born 1891, in England. He was a plate steward, second class, on the Titanic. Arthur survived the sinking in Lifeboat 13. In 1923, he married Lillian Florence Foote. Arthur passed away in 1951 at the age of 69. He was buried in England, but the whereabouts of his remains is unknown. The next survivor is Kate Buss Willis, born 1875, in England. She boarded the Titanic and was rescued in Lifeboat 9. Kate was one of the last survivors for the 60th anniversary of the sinking. She passed away in 1972, at the age of 96, due to heart failure. Kate was buried in Oregon. The next survivor is Carolina Bistrom, born 1872, in Sweden. She boarded the Titanic and was a second-class passenger. Carolina survived the sinking. Pictured here is the nightgown she was wearing on that fateful night. In 1924, she married Mr. Berggren. Carolina passed away in 1964, at the age of 91. She was cremated in New York. If you like this content, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing to my channel at MeTime806. Thank you very much.